Okay, so I think we are ready to go on YouTube. So I will call to order our regular meeting of council. And just before we start today, I will just ask our new director, Twyla, to just comment on Councillor Poone's absence.
Yes, so Councillor Poon on September 21st requested a leave of absence from the city. Councillor Poon is a candidate in the upcoming provincial election. According to legislation, Councillor Poon, while not required to take a leave, is entitled to do so and may miss up to 4 consecutive meetings, be absent for 60 days, or request further support from council as a whole, which they could do by resolution to grant her a further absence. But for now, Councillor Poon will be absent from city meetings as she's the candidate in the provincial election.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Okay, so we've called to order our meeting, and we will just recognize that we are holding our meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Hupachesit and Sishot First Nations. Are there any late items to be added to our agenda from councillors? Seeing none, any from our city clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
Great. And then would anybody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And we have minutes from the special meeting held at 9:30 a.m. and the regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on September 14th. Would somebody like to move adoption? Moved by Councillor Washington, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And public input period. City Clerk, do we have any public input items today?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and if I may, just before we admit Mr. Anderson, who has public input, we have expanded the opportunities for residents to participate during real time. Parameters around that are individuals need to contact the clerk's department directly. So moving forward, this is somewhat of a message to the general citizens of Port Alberni that they can take advantage of this opportunity. And I will now admit Mr. Anderson, who has public input for today's meeting.
Thank you.
And Mr. Anderson, you've been admitted to council's regular meeting and may proceed with your submission.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I haven't got you on my TV screen. I can't figure it. My report is simply on February 2020, I met with the building inspector with questions regarding the ongoing renovation project at the Kingsway Hotel. The renovations have been ongoing for about 2 years, and at this time, we're still not complete. At this time, all parties were aware no permits were in place and inspections of work were not taking place. 2 days later, I requested a meeting with the Mayor, Minions, and Mr. Ply. At this meeting, I talked about the sensitivity of the issue as it involved a council member. I expressed my reluctance to bring this matter up at a council meeting, as I believe the fair way to deal with this issue was to give Ms. Spoon an opportunity to respond to my concerns in a more private manner. I also expressed my hope that we would be able to work together in an effort to acquire answers to my questions. This, I am sorry to say, did not happen, and as I received no response from either the mayor or staff, Mr. Ply did state at this meeting that if you went through council, the meeting, it may imply that council was extending privileges to council that were not extended to the general public. My response was simply, yes, that is why I am here. Several weeks later, the COVID shut meetings down, and since I have had no voice in the matter since then, and 6 months later, I'm still waiting for answers. Time limits restrict my ability to properly represent my case to the public, so I'm going to refer to some comments made in response to my questions at the question period and September 17th council meeting. Mayor stated that I had been put in contact with staff to answer questions. This has not happened. Mayor stated it is not common practice to give final reports on issues such as this. I have not a problem with this, but I'm still waiting to get a response to questions presented to Mayor and staff 6 months ago. Stop work orders have been lifted and things have been satisfied. There has been no response as to what issues were found and how they have been satisfied. Were my concerns even legitimate? Mr. Ply commented, I think there's an element that Neil wants to hold an elected council person accountable. That does not mean an elected officer is accountable for what they do in their private and business life. Mr. Ply stated he did not know if there was a venue to hold a councillor accountable. Mr. Ply also commented that what we have not been able to do is handle this in a way that is transparent, and I think it is a transparency that we struggle with. Mr. Anderson still has questions, but this is not the proper forum to get answers. Perhaps freedom of information request is a better forum. Mayor Minions suggested to council that if they believed a response from staff was appropriate, a motion could be made. Mayor Minions or council did not put forward a motion. Transparency and accountability and giving at times a legitimacy to concerns brought forward by a member of the public is not something we hope will happen. It is an expectation of our elected representatives and the staff working on our behalf. I just feel that the City Council has avoided in every way bringing this issue up to the public. Thank you for extending my 3 minutes. I do appreciate that, but again, I'm having trouble with getting onto the Zoom on my TV. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And I know that this is not, an easy way to bring this forward in this format that we're in right now, but I appreciate you coming on to bring your concerns again. I'm going to ask the CAO to try to work with Mr. Anderson over the next 2 weeks until our next council meeting to try to put an answer to some of the questions that have been brought forward. And my hope is that will be satisfactory to Mr. Anderson to have to be able to have an opportunity to directly ask those questions and get answers to them. And if that is the case, then I would imagine we likely won't hear from Mr. Anderson about this at the next meeting if he feels he's been given the opportunity to get some answers. So council, unless anyone disagrees with that, if I see kind of a consensus, which I think I do, then I would just ask our CAO to set a time to have a conversation and try to bring some finality to this issue for Mr. Anderson. Okay, City Clerk, was there any more correspondence?
No, Madam Mayor, that's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, then we will move on to our delegations. We have just one delegation today, and it is from the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, Bill Collette, who is in attendance to present information to council on the proposed Port Alberni welcome sign. Welcome, Bill. Can see him coming on, and I think he's just waiting for his audio to connect.
Mr. Collette, are you able to unmute yourself?
There you go. I think I'm unmuted.
We can hear you now. Welcome, Bill.
Oh, great. Thank you.
We will just pass it over to you. Appreciate you being here and looking forward to seeing what you've come back with.
Okay, great. Is everybody on the line there? I'm only seeing 3 of you. Is that correct, or is there more?
No, we've got everyone on council here except for Councillor Poon, who is currently on a leave of absence. Yeah, so we can all see and hear you.
Perfect, good. Okay, thanks very much.
Sorry,
So-
Bill, just before you start, are you able to share your own screen or did you want me to share?
I think okay, so this is your screen, right, that I'm looking at?
Yes, yes.
I think it's better because I'm having problems at my home here. And when I've got too much data, I seem to get bumped off. Maybe I'm not paying my bill. I'm not sure.
Okay,
But
if you don't mind prompting me then when you
Sure.
want a slide to change, and then that's why it limits the visibility of everybody is because I'm actually sharing my screen. So,
okay.
okay.
Okay. So yeah, you can go over to the next screen and I'll just, or the next slide. So what I wanted to do was, now is this the same? Can you just move forward one more slide? Oh, I think you're on you're on the last one, Twyla. You're not on the current.
Okay, apologies. I will stop sharing and see if I can find the correct one.
Yeah, in the meantime, I'll see if I can.
Here, I've got it.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
no worries. I thought I was losing it there for a second.
Nope. And I will just, there we go.
There we are. That's the current one. So Council, thanks for having me on. And just a reminder that we did do a presentation back in April on the sign project. And we're thrilled that Council or the city engaged us to do some of the legwork for this. So next slide, Twyla. So in just starting this off, I think everybody agrees that the Parksville sign is certainly a standout on Vancouver Island. But I think everybody also agrees that it's a pricey one. And it was developed 10 years ago at a price of about $130,000. So I think, and I think everybody agrees that's probably a little steep for what we were looking for. But I just kind of wanted to start it off with that. Next slide. The new space. So this was one that Council liked. And again, we found probably 20 or 30 when we did the presentation in April. And this was one that we kind of anticipated that Council would like. It's very kind of simple, yet it's quite effective. And I don't mean the word simple in a negative tone. It's quite nice. There's one at each side, north and south ends of the new space. And you can see that it cost about $30,000 to develop that sign, and they're quite effective, and they're quite appealing. Next slide. This was another one that we know that Council really liked, as did we. And this one is Hooayat First Nations, beautiful sign. And the price of it was, it's still hard to believe based on the research I've been doing. I actually think that there's costs that haven't been shared with us because it almost sounds impossible to do it at $13,000. But regardless, it's one of the more cost-effective signs, and yet very visually effective. We did contact the developers of these signs. If you want to go to the next slide, Twyla. We reached out to those developers of both Hooayat and then the new space sign. Plus, we reached out to other organizations, even here, to see if we could get some ideas. The one that developed Hooayat was initially quite interested, but I'm not quite sure why they seemed to opt out. They just kind of stopped returning calls. Maybe they're too busy, I'm not sure. But anyways, we went through Scott Signs in Parksville. And Earl Scott, I've known him for years when I used to live in Parksville. Anyways, he's got a very reputable company there, and they developed the new space sign. So I went and visited with Earl, and we moved forward with a design thing. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is the start of what Earl has come up with. We actually had him do 2 sets of drawings, and we did have to pay for that. So you do have to pay for this kind of stuff. So he's come up with 3 designs. They're all very similar. Basically, if you go back to the charrette done, I think it was 2015 or 2016, the charrette itself talked about the need for community signage. It referenced the fact that we needed to say Port Alberni. We needed it to be very, rather simple yet professional. And we needed, the suggestion came up to have some sort of First Nations component in with it. You can see that the sign there on the bottom has opportunity to insert Upachicit and Sashot First Nations, as well as the city logo, if council wanted to go that direction, or anything, or remove that. This is just basically a design right now. So take a good look at that one, and then we'll move to the next slide. So this one, same concept, just a little bit different. You can see the oval is in the center of this one. And again, quite nice. And you can see the platform that it's on. And next slide. And this one, sorry, for some reason the platform doesn't show, but it's the same design. And you can see that he's got rid of the oval and got rid of the little wave markings. So this is the third of 3 options. And if we go to the next slide, this is all 3 of them together. So this might be the most effective way to look at it. So you can see what he's come up with. And again, I want to emphasize that, this is just his design based on some input from us. It can be something that you want to move forward with, or something you want to start over with. It's just, it's kind of where we've come to, and showing it around a little bit in limited. People have really quite liked the designs, but I haven't heard a comment as to which of the 3 is preferred. Everybody, I imagine everybody will have a different preference. If you want to move to the next slide, Twyla. So here's an aerial shot of where the sign is proposed to go, basically on the inside border of the city of Port Alberni, at the corner of Johnson Road and John Street, out in front of Walmart, basically. It's currently where that sign is, the biker-friendly community, which that sign probably needs to come down. It's kind of a dated sign now. Time flies. But anyways, this sign would go right on the corner there. There's a lot of underground stuff there that would have to have some engineering involved. But again, that's where it's been thought it would be an ideal location for it. And if we want to go to the next slide. And this is just photoshopped in there as to what it could look like. And again, I don't know whether whether I've got the Photoshop big enough or too big or whatever, but I would say it's probably a bit too small. But anyways, that's kind of what it would look like at that corner. And then next slide. So this is budget considerations for this. This is known dollars right now, or semi-known. Currently, we've spent the $1,240 for the design work. And then Scott Sign's quote for one sign. I also discussed with him the potential of additional signs down the road. And he has indicated that if he did multiples, that of course the cost per sign would go down. I'm not sure how much, but anyways, his fee was quoted at $14,750. Now that's a little bit of time ago, but I'm sure he would stand by that. It would be a very similar price. The 15,000 quote is engineering cost, excavation. We had Bowerman come out and take a look at it, and they're shooting from the hip. He's not positive of that fee, so I think council would need to realize that's a best guess estimate right now. But that's the number he's given me, the maximum number. But again, I'm reluctant to say it wouldn't be higher or potentially. And then I've added in an additional $10,000. Again, this is not yet confirmed, but if you go back to the charrette, there was discussion about landscaping and lighting and that sort of thing around the sign. So shooting from the hip, might be ideal to budget an extra $10,000 in there for some nice landscaping and lighting. And then our fee, just kind of estimating that at about $2,500 based on hours put into this program. So at this point, a total estimate of about $43,490. And if council wanted to go back to the drawing board with Scott signs, they'd need to add another $1,240 or more for more work on design. And that's really, that kind of wraps it up for me. I certainly field any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions from council? Ron,
I do.
Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick, actually more comment than questions. And thank you, Bill, for all the groundwork that you've done here. I'm really excited about all three combos. I kind of lean towards the ones that have a little bit of color to them as well. When you go back to the one slide at the bottom left-hand corner, version mounted, got me kind of excited. I would also like to visit the cost for doing two signs. I would love to see something in the neighborhood of the Orange Bridge coming in from coming into Port Alberni from the west, heading east. I'm not sure what we have in our budget. If anybody could comment on what our budget is for the signage.
We have 25,000 currently.
Oh, well, then I guess we're after one sign. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Councillor Haggard and then Solda and then Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Bill, for all the work that you've done. I really like the designs. And I'm glad that you discussed about some landscaping. The sign on the highway coming into Port Alberni always looks so sad because it's just, there's not a flower or a blade of grass within, I don't know how far, but it just looks pretty sad up there about south. So if we're going to do it, we need to do it properly and have it look very attractive. One question, is there no one in Port Alberni that has the ability to do a sign project?
Well, I can't affirmative answer that, but I would suggest that probably or possibly not. We did reach out to a couple of organizations, two people that we became aware of that might be able to do it. One fellow, I've talked to him a few times, but, just trying to get response is like pulling teeth. We need to do this professionally, and we need someone to really want the work. And that hasn't been apparent. The other organization I reached out to, they had actually reached out to me via social media, and I reached out to them and never ever did get a response back. So, I would say that this type of work, first of all, they have a track record of this, and and they do good work. They are, by the way, just as an aside, they are a member of the local Chamber of Commerce. They support our business community, and they aren't here. I'm not going to deny that they are out of Parksville, but of my research, that's what I've learned.
Great, thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Councillor Solda and then Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, when we talk about local, did we ever think of going out for tender? I mean, I agree professional is important, but there might be some other people. A lot of people have moved to Port Alberni, and I think, and they're artists and different, and I think we should check out the local people. Anyways, lifespan on the signs. Did they say anything, Bill, what the lifespan is?
Well, I think, yeah, there's certainly some annual maintenance that would have to be done. But that's somewhat mitigated by the roof that gets put on and some of the initial work that's done right up front. But you know, it's like anything, you got to look after it, right? You own a home, you got to look after it. So we would have to, or the city would have to have some limited budget. I don't think it'd be that much to maintain it on, maybe not annually, but certainly every 2 to 5 years, there'd have to be some attention paid to it. And from a landscaping perspective, that would be an ongoing cost.
Okay, I know the biggest thing about the sign on the highway too was should be lit, and people complained about that a lot. My other thing is location. Now we have 2 ways to come into Port Alberni. Well, I understand where the mall part, but there's the other side, the Redford Street. I mean, and I definitely agree with the West Coast, but my problem is if somebody decides to take a left instead of a right, there's nothing that does say welcome to Port Alberni. So why at that mall? Why not where it's located now? Because they have a left or a right.
Well,
Actually, Councillor Solda, I think that we had actually talked about that location at our last meeting, recognizing that there's probably at least 3 locations where we should have welcome to Port Alberni signs. So I think that's probably at our direction rather than Bill's specifically.
Okay, and it's the only reason I bring that up, Madam Mayor, is because there's a lot of new faces in Port Alberni who would be asking those kind of questions because they haven't been at past meetings or listened to past meetings. My biggest thing is about a local putting it out to tender. I like the one with the color. I think color is always good, so I don't want a plain Jane, but I still like what UAET did, and it seemed affordable. Maybe knocking on doors would be, and we have 2 reps from that represent the ACRD, and the chair happens to be UAET, and it might be somebody to talk to and try to get the information from him too. So just bringing that up. Thank you.
If I can interject, Councillor Solda, the Huayet sign was built out of Victoria. That's the company that built it, just so you know. So I thought I wanted to clarify that. The other thing about the location of the sign, and the mayor is correct, it was a council sort of decision, but I remind council that in our April presentation, one of the things we learned in our study was that some cities, in particular Terrace, I believe, they actually had to move their sign because they were initially placed out in the regional district. I was initially for years a proponent of it being in a different location, but that taught me right there that it needs to be at the entrance to the city. So you're right, there is 3, probably 4 entrances to the city, but maybe it's just starting with the first and seeing where we go from there.
It's just that, Madam Mayor, we do have a lot of people on 3rd Avenue, a lot of businesses that are saying, what is the main shopping area of Port Alberni? And this would also mitigate their concerns as well as the other side, Johnson Road. I hate to say 2 sides, but it's the way it is.
Yeah, I think recognizing that, we all are aware that there is not one perfect location. And so I think right now the conversation is, let's get to a sign that we're all happy with. Let's get it to a price point that, we deem affordable. And then let's have a conversation about, how many signs, and maybe it's 1 a year for 3 or 4 years. Or maybe there's a savings to do them all at once. We can have that conversation. But today is really more about the design and giving some feedback on that. So I'm hearing that people like the color. I actually think there's almost no color in any of them, just a tiny little blue and green. So that might be some feedback that we would like to see a bit more color, but we can have that conversation. Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I too am disappointed that we're not using somebody locally. But my question is, and it is to do with the blue-green. That looks like a stylized wave or a fish or something like that. Is that something that somebody just brought up, or is that a city thing? Because it does have a look of, kind of a city logo almost.
We didn't have input into that wave concept there, but again, it does, the blue and green, if you look at it, it depicts water and forest. In my mind, when I first saw it, I personally liked it, but I had no input into that. That was something that Earl Scott put in, and so that's where it's got to. I want to reiterate with council that there's probably nobody in the city that believes more in supporting local business than I do. I do believe that, the research that we've done and the efforts that we've made have indicated to me that there may not be either a desire or the current capability to do this locally. I could be wrong, and if I am, I regret being wrong, but that's just what I've discovered along the way here. And again, I also looked at the two people that built signs that council really liked back in April.
Thank you so much. Councillor Washington, any feedback?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, good job on the presentation, Bill. It's a good start. I'm kind of glad. I too worried about the local thing, but it looks like you've done your research there. And I think this location's the good location for a start, and gives us more to move on later on with signs in other locations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Bill, for your work on this. I have to say I am quite picky when it comes to things like this. And I certainly don't think that, this is the sign we should go with and just as is. I have a lot of feedback I'd like to give, but I do really like the basic concept. So I think we have a really good starting point. I would like to see us have something that is more authentic to Port Alberni than the wave. I think the wave looks kind of cool, but it reminds me of the Welcome to Nanaimo sign. It also makes me feel like it would be maybe something that you would see on like the Tofino sign or something like that. So I think this is a really great starting point. And I would like to personally take a bit of time and then maybe send some feedback. And if any other councillors have feedback as well, send you some feedback by email that you could pass along to the designer to maybe make some revisions and come back. I think that this is a really good concept for us to work from. But given that we're not in, any kind of urgent rush to get a sign done, I think we should make sure that it is exactly as we want it before we proceed. So from my perspective, I think this is a good starting point, and I think we could just work to make it a bit more unique to our community, maybe a little less generic, that kind of thing. Councillor Solda.
I would totally agree with that. I think there's a lot of more discussion on it, and I also hope that members of our community, artists, and that would make some feedback to city, email us, and give us your feedback. It's always good to hear from others too, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, so if I could suggest then that if any councillors, or members of the public over the next couple of weeks, just take a bit of time to look over the concepts and provide any feedback, then we can maybe gather that and pass along feedback to Bill to keep working with the designer on the sign and get to a point where it could come back to council at a later date. I'm happy to see just a start on this project. And I think, Bill, you've done a great job of taking kind of the concepts that we liked from other communities and working with them from there to get to this point. So looking forward to having this come back again in the future. Okay, thank you. So council, no decisions today, of course, but feel free over the next couple of weeks to send along feedback. You can send it to Bill directly or certainly send to me. And then I would imagine the next step would be getting kind of a revision on the design and bringing it back from there. Okay, so thanks so much, Bill, for coming on today.
Great, thanks.
your
Have
work on
have a good day.
Okay, we will move on to, there's no unfinished business, so on to staff reports. And the first one, of course, is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated September 28, 2020 be received and checks numbering 146801 to 146877 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $2,117,551.19 be approved.
Thank you. Is there
Second,
a
Madam
second?
Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. All in favor?
Mm.
Carried. Thank you. And moving on to item 2 from the Manager of Planning, we have development variance permit for 4191 Butte Street. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before you for consideration is an application for development variance permit. The applicants are seeking relief from the zoning bylaw regulations, specifically section 6.12.2, as it relates to projections into a side yard setback. So recently the applicants built a house with a garage that protruded into the minimum side yard setback of the east property line. And a development variance permit was issued for this property by council previously to help address the east side yard setback encroachment. However, at that time, section 6.12.2 was overlooked. And so it has been identified that an additional variance is required for full bylaw compliance. This variance is being requested to vary the projection distance of the eaves and gutters into the reduced side yard. The requested variance is specific to side yards, which are less than 1.5 meters in width. No significant impacts to the use of the property or surrounding properties are anticipated. Public notice has been given and no correspondence has been received. So in summary, the Planning Department supports issuing the development variance permit number 105 for 4191 Butte Street. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
I guess my only question is, how do we prevent this from happening again? I understand that prior to pouring a foundation, someone needs approval, and I just don't know how this slipped through the cracks. And it does look rather unusual when you take a look at how those two roofs practically overhang one another.
Thank you. Manager Planning, any comment on that just for the future?
Absolutely, yes. And I believe we might have brought this up too when the initial variance was being discussed. And so correcting the encroachment into side yard setbacks or any of the property setbacks is now being addressed through the building permit process by requesting that a building location certificate be provided as part of the building permit process. So this is not a practice that Port Alberni had previously had in place, but it's very common with other municipalities. And recognizing that there was a bit of a pattern of an issue here, we've instigated that as part of the building permit process. So we're hoping that this won't continue to be an issue, and that should rectify the matter for the most part. In this specific instance, the additional variance was really just a minor oversight by staff in with regards to eaves and projections. So no additional changes based on what's already being built. It's just to basically do a additional housekeeping tidy up to make sure that the building's fully in compliance with the bylaw.
Thank you. That's helpful for the future. Any other comments or questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the motions? Oh, you're muted, Councillor Corbeil.
I'm trying to read one computer and talk to another. I move that the City Council authorize the issuance of development variance permit number 105 to vary zoning bylaw 4832 as follows. Vary section 6.12.2 projections to allow a projection over 75%, 0.6 meters of the required side yard, 0.8 meter for a variance of 25%, 0.2 meters, for development on land legally described as Lot 1, District Lot 1, Alberni District Plan, VIP 81030, and located at 4191 Butte Street.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no further questions or comments, all in favor? Carried. And thank you, Manager of Planning, for your work on this. Okay, moving on to item 3 from our CAO, Connect the Keys.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, you will recall that at your August 10th meeting, you directed staff work on working toward an application for 2 grant streams that are available. The intake deadlines are in October. The first one's October 1st. And that you said to work on those grant applications for the Connect the Keys project, which is integral to the strategic plan. And so I want to describe to you right now an opportunity and a challenge. And the opportunity, of course, is just that. There's up to, we think up to $2.5 million potentially available to the city to help us realize the Connect the Keys pathway, a multimodal pathway, which would be a hard service pathway that anybody could use to walk, ride, roll, glide from Harbor Key to Victoria Key, or in the reverse, obviously. And so that's we think a profound opportunity, and we're excited to work on that. And obviously council is excited by that as well. The challenge comes in because of the grant intake deadline, we've had to accelerate some aspects of the project and put some things somewhat out of sequence. And so primarily around engagement and determination of route. And so where ordinarily we would want to engage first and foremost with First Nations, affected landowners and stakeholders and the general public. We have engaged with affected landowners, and we've engaged with both Hupecheset and Sashat First Nations, but not in the fullest way. Those engagements have involved us saying, hey, look, we have a grant opportunity. We're seeking your support to enable our application for that grant. And there's more communications and engagement that needs to follow afterwards. And we haven't yet begun really an engagement process with the public on this issue. In a similar way, we've had to target a route, a pathway route that is achievable or was within our ability to build on right now. So that means we have to either own the land or have the permission of the landowners to pass through. So the route it primarily follows the rail line between the 2 keys. And we think that route can be improved over the course of time through further engagement with property owners. And we intend to do that. So when I say there's a challenge, the challenge is today, council needs to consider whether to direct us to make a grant application or not. And if you direct us to make a grant application for these 2 streams, funding streams, we will make an application for $2.5 million to each of them. We won't get both of them. We think we have a good chance to get one of them. And it will mean that the city will have to also amend our budget to reflect the remaining costs in our budget, which is a requirement of the grant application. We've retained an engineering firm to do some preliminary design on the route and some costing estimate, and that cost estimate has come in at $7 million. So with a $2.5 million grant, the city's portion of the cost would be $4.5 million. And as I said, we'll continue to work on the route and refine the route and refine the engineering of that and communicate with council and the public on what the route is and what the costs of that construction are. But at this point in time, council is faced with a decision. Do we want to make an application for a grant? And if the answer is yes, then we need to amend our budget to include $4.5 million as on top of the grant. And council, you likely have questions around what the engagement process should look like and will look like after the grant application has been submitted. The manager of planning is prepared with a bit of a graphic to walk us through what our engagement process will look like from this point forward as we go through the winter and next season. I expect you have questions, and if I can't answer them, other staff members will try to answer those.
Thank you. Are we having Caitlin on to talk about the engagement?
I think when you're ready for that, we can, if that's what you want to start with.
Sure. Okay, so let's start with questions from council on Tim's presentation. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not so much a question, just a comment. Every workshop or webinar that I've been to over the last several months, the message I keep getting is successful communities moving forward have green space, and it includes improved walkability, multimodal pathways for improved livability for its residents and also for resident attraction. So I know the price tag is very heavy, but I think we can continue to working towards other financial opportunities. But in the end of the day, we do have to invest in ourselves if you want other people to come into community and invest in our community. So I think moving forward, I think, I don't want to say trust us to the public blindly, but just assure the public that we'll continue getting their input and that we will look for other financial opportunities. I already have a couple of ideas that we can talk about at another time, but we will continue having that conversation as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard. And I think you've made some really good points. I also think it's important for us to remember at this point that this is very much a placeholder in the budget and a kind of a first draft of what the path could look like. So there's a lot of changes that could be made at this point. Council hasn't had an in-depth look, of course, at it yet. So a lot of work to be done and other funding sources to be looked to for this. So the money right now is a placeholder, not an actual spend in our budget. We will be applying for other grants and working with, I had a conversation with one corporate company last week about possible funding and that type of thing. So there's lots of other options to look to. So I'll go to Councillor Solda and then I think Councillor Corbeil.
Okay, Madam Mayor, just a quick question on the $2.5 million that would be held into a contingency fund for this project. Is that if we were successful? Is that correct?
CAO?
Madam
How does
Mayor,
that work?
I'd like the Director of Finance to speak to that.
Madam Mayor, so the $2.5 million is a portion of the project which would be provided through grant funding. So that $2.5 million is part of the entire project for the let me get the number again, but it was
4.5 plus.
Just over $7 million. So that would be the portion that we'd receive from grant funding.
No, I understand that, but would it be held, say if we were successful in getting it, receiving it, it would be put into a contingency fund for this particular project, correct?
I don't think that's what contingency
or a fund.
Yeah, I'm not completely clear on what you're asking.
Okay, it wouldn't go, Madam Mayor, what I'm looking for is not going to go into general revenue or anything like that. It's going to be earmarked. Okay, so on the 4.5 million, what that we would have to add, the city would have to put into the 5-year plan, what year would we put it in? Would it be on the 5th year, 4th year, 3rd year, or broken down?
So, Madam Mayor, at this time, we had $1.5 million in the financial plan in 2021 for this project. There's other projects that we've identified that could be shifted or funds could be used from those projects or reserves that could fund this project. And that would go over the next 3 years if we're successful for this grant.
Okay, I just want to be clear for the public. That's what I'm asking. And as Madam Mayor, you said we're going to be looking for other opportunities for other fundings, other grants and everything throughout the process, correct?
Correct. And it might be helpful, Cindy, I think kind of what you're maybe getting at is what would be helpful at least is to know what would the timeline be if we are successful in the grant that we would have to complete the grant. Is it 2021? Is it further? What would be the timeline from the provincial government? Yeah. I'm not sure, Director of Finance, if you can answer that or if our CAO could.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to ask Pat Deacon to weigh in on that. Mr. Deacon's writing the grant application for us.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. The announcements are expected in sometime in the summer of 2021. The agreement, if we're successful, will require us to complete the project by March 31st of 2026.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, that's very helpful. Go
I
ahead.
think that's important to know, Madam Mayor, because we have had money before, grants before, and we had to return because it was just too costly at the time. So I just want to make sure we have time.
Yes, and I think that point is really important. This is not, money that we would get in 2 months, start planning and do the work in early next year. This is going to be a process. And the nice thing about that process is it allows us the time to, we may have to put $4.5 million tentatively in our budget right now, but it allows us the time to find other sources of funding for this project before we have to actually start doing work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, notwithstanding that there's potentially other monies out there, I mean, that price tag is a little bit scary, but I certainly, I'm 100% behind this project. And like Councillor Haggard said, I think most successful communities have some sort of multimodal walkway. But I just think, we're looking at probably in excess of $2,000 a meter. So I would love to know exactly what's anticipated. I could picture we'd probably need a bridge over Roger Creek and a bridge over Dry Creek. So that would cost some money, potentially elevated or a cantilevered walkway along the river. Which according to when Nanaimo did this, cantilevered walkway, for example, could cost $10,000 a running meter. But I'm curious about what's involved, because I honestly think we could sharpen our pencils without, not still having a very successful walkway. Thank you.
Yeah, Ron, and I think you're right on that for sure. I think it's important to note that Council has not even viewed the map yet, and that is just our priority right now is to get the grant application submitted. There's going to be a lot of work to be done in determining exactly where the route is and determining exactly, what type of structure and all of that. So there's absolutely going to be places that we can look to changing the plan a bit, and Council and the community will have that opportunity. We just aren't at that phase yet. So this is the point where we have a rough plan that has, been put together by an engineer based on the simplest route that we have complete control over. This is not to say that the plan won't change from here. And of course, when Council has input, as we do, we are likely going to make some changes. This is just about getting that grant application in. And of course, we'll be staying in line with, the general concept, but there's going to be a lot of room from here to, to make those reviews or those revisions and based on feedback and all of that. Tim, do you want to add anything else to that?
Madam Mayor, you're correct. We did engage a third-party engineering firm. We needed a Class C estimate in order to be eligible for the grant. And so that is the work they undertook. And we haven't attached that costing to the report, nor have we attached a map of the tentative route. And the reason we haven't attached a map of the routing is it crosses over private land. And we have support from those landowners subject to the details being sorted out to cross their land. So it would not be fair to them to show the public a map crossing private land for which we don't have locked down permission to build. And we were able to get permission, tentative permission from those landowners to enable the grant application. So again, as you have said, things are out of sequence here because we are driving toward this grant application deadline. And because of that, we're having to suspend some of the steps that we otherwise would have taken first.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's helpful. I think we had Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Haggard and Councillor Washington. Nope, Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you look at the Nanaimo waterfront walkway, that walkway is used constantly, whether it's summer, spring, fall, winter. It's always busy. It's always used by the public. And the same with the Campbell River walkway. It is used a lot and it is absolutely beautiful. And that is one thing that Port Alberni has not done as well as it could have done in the past years, is really try and capitalize on our biggest asset, which is our waterfront. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us that we just can't miss trying to work on. So I am supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Haggard. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to add to Councillor Haggard, there's one in Victoria as well, and it's well used day during the day, early morning joggers, stuff like that. So it's a destination, and I'm just saying we got to get this together to get that grant application in, to get that grant money, or else this whole project probably wouldn't be a go. So be patient with us, trust us, and when we get that grant application, when we get that grant money, we'll further it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for your comments. Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motions? There's 3 separate ones there.
You know how I love to read. That council direct an application to be submitted to the Investing in the Canada Infrastructure Program, British Columbia Community Culture and Recreation CCR program for $2.5 million to complete the Connect the Keys Pathway project.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any final comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
And that council direct that an application be submitted to Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, British Columbia Rural and Northern Communities, RNC program for $2.5 million to complete the Connect the Keys Pathway project.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
And the council authorized staff to amend the city's 5-year financial plan bylaw 2020-2024 bylaw number 5003 to include $4,511,821 in city funding in the 2021 for the Connect the Keys Pathway project.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. Any final comments? I just want to thank staff who have worked on this, gotten to this point, specifically Pat Deacon. I know he's had a lot of helpers and staff, but I know he spent an incredible amount of time putting this together already. A big project on a short timeline. So thank you, Pat, for your work on this, even though, of course, you haven't gotten us to the number we want to be at, but I think we all have a lot of faith in staff to work through the rest of the process, look for additional funding and that kind of thing. So, so thank you. So on the question or on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4 from the Director of Corporate Services, Vancouver Island Economic Summit, October 27th and 29th.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance annually hosts a VI Economic Summit. This is their 14th year and it takes place the end of October. And in response to COVID, like everybody else, they're going virtual this year. So Councillors Haggard and Councillor Paulson request an interest in participating in the summit due to no travel costs and on in-person attendance. Participation cost to attend for each is $245.28. So looking to council to authorize their attendance at the summit virtually and as per city policy.
Thank you. I will make that motion that council authorize Councillors Haggard and Paulson to participate in the 14th annual Vancouver Island Economic Summit, the State of the Island Economic Summit, taking place October 27th to 29th virtually. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Washington. And just wanted to check if anyone else was interested in attending. before we make that decision. I'm unfortunately not available. Otherwise, I would love to. It's a great conference. Okay, seeing no other interest, then on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, carried. Thank you. Moving on to item G, bylaws, and the first one from the Manager of Planning, proposed zoning bylaw amendments for 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue. Welcome back, Caitlin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So before you for consideration is third reading and final adoption of the zoning bylaw amendments for 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue. The purpose of the bylaw amendments is to rezone the subject properties from the RM1 low-density multifamily residential zone to the RM3 high-density multifamily residential zone, and to permit a site-specific text amendment that would increase the number of stories to 5 and increase the maximum building height to 18 meters. The proposed amendment is consistent with the official community plan land use designation and meets the strategic objectives of the OCP by providing a diverse range of housing options within the community. The subject properties will remain in development permit area number 1, multifamily residential, for the form and character of the development. At the September 14th, 2020 regular council meeting, council waived the public hearing requirement for a second time and gave direction to provide public notice in accordance with section 467 of the Local Government Act. To date, the planning department has received 2 new letters of correspondence. And in summary, those concerns expressed in the letters relate to increased traffic and traffic control issues, loss of affordable housing stock with the existing Woodland Village development, as well as crime and safety issues. All other conditions have been met, and the applicant has requested that third reading and final adoption of the bylaws now be considered by council. And in summary, the planning department supports amending the zoning bylaw for this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Okay, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read these?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 35, 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue de Build, bylaw number 4993 be read a third time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments? Seeing, oh, Councillor Haggard.
All right, I didn't get my hand up before when you asked for questions. I didn't get my hand up quick enough. I'd like to ask the Manager of Planning, there seems to be a lot of concern about increased traffic in that area and the possibility of the need of some traffic lights. Is it possible to ask them if you can do a traffic impact study as well? I have a feeling I know what the answer will be what if they do a study, but I think in order just to satisfy some of those concerns that the public is that we're hearing from the public.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Yep, absolutely. Council could certainly request additional information. It would trigger the requirement for either, again, to go back to another public hearing or to waive the public hearing again for a third time.
Caitlin, could you comment on, is there a size of development or not specific to this one, but is there a type of development that triggers a traffic impact study, or do we just request that when there is concern? I'm just wondering if we have a kind of a policy around that.
We don't have any policy at this point in time. It is something that a lot of other jurisdictions do adopt policy around and incorporate that in the requirements for rezonings or for development permits. So that's certainly something that the municipality could and I would say should encourage.
That's great, thank you. Good to know for the future. Okay, so we have third reading moved and seconded. Seeing no further questions, I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? Carried. And Councillor Corbeil, if you'd like to continue with the next one.
Okay, B, that zoning bylaw map amendment number 35, 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue, DeBield bylaw number 4993, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk, and numbered 4993.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And if you want to continue with C.
C, that zoning text amendment number T22, site-specific uses, RM3 high density, multiple family residential, bylaw number 4994, be read a third time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
And D, that zoning text amendment number T22, site-specific uses, RM3 high density, multiple family residential, bylaw number 4994, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and clerk, and numbered 4994.
Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any final questions, comments? Councillor Haggard.
I don't want to stop the process and have it start all over again, but is it possible for the manager planning to encourage the developer to do a traffic impact study to address these concerns from the residents in the area? Not force them to, but strongly encourage them to?
Go ahead, Caitlin.
Perhaps our Director of Corporate Services can maybe speak to the process a little bit more, but the challenge with requesting, we could certainly request for additional information, but it would inherently trigger us to go back in the process because it would be new information. So really that's certainly at the will of council.
Council, I'm comfortable with the, personally, I'm comfortable with the number of additional units based on the number of units that are already there, you know, and would be coming down. I'm comfortable personally with the net increase there, that I don't feel that this is an area we would need a traffic impact study. I do understand the concerns from residents. My feeling is that the level of traffic would still be acceptable. So I think we'd be asking for something that would really just justify an answer that we already know, but I do understand the concerns coming forward, and changes in a neighborhood that you live in is, you know, are always hard to you know, wrap your head around. So if council would like a traffic impact study, then I think we should feel very comfortable in making that decision. If we feel there's justification for it, it doesn't matter if it slows down the process, we should ask for it. And if we're comfortable with the net increase in that we see potentially could happen in traffic, then I think we should move forward today. So I will just, we do have moved and seconded the final reading here. If anyone would like to request any additional information, then we would have to defeat this. So I will call the question, and if we defeat it, then we can move forward from there. So on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, carried. And thank you very much for the information, Caitlin. And moving on to item number 2, Caitlin just went off our screen, but she will be right back. For Manager of Planning, proposed official community plan bylaw and zoning bylaw amendment, citywide cannabis cultivation and processing. And so I know we've discussed this at length, but I will just turn it over again to the Manager of Planning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So before you, council, for consideration are amendments to the official community plan and zoning bylaw that would introduce cannabis production facilities, so specifically cultivation and processing uses within city limits. So staff have developed draft bylaws that both incorporate public input that was gathered through a public engagement process in 2019 and research based on best practices demonstrated in other communities. The proposed approach will permit certain types of cannabis production facilities in industrial zones and limited commercial zones. Additional regulations have been proposed to attempt to mitigate concerns about odor, noise, air quality, and clustering of cannabis uses. And all cannabis production facilities would be required to obtain a development permit to also help mitigate some of the concerns and as well ensure high quality development standards are applied for new development. Recently, additional public feedback has been given at the public hearing, which was held on September 14th, 2020, as well as by way of written correspondence. A summary of the concerns expressed includes the following. So potential impact of temperature inversions in the Alberni Valley, odor and emissions not being properly regulated and controlled at any level, by any level of government, so municipal, provincial, or federal. Pollutants caused by the industry, location of industrial zones being near the waterfront and breezes coming off the inlet, odor issues with existing medical marijuana facilities, outdoor growing operations on ALR land, which the city doesn't have jurisdiction over, and enforcement of the bylaws. So City Council is being asked to consider whether they would like to proceed with third reading of the proposed bylaws as currently written, or if you'd like to proceed, or if you'd like to direct staff to make further revisions to the proposed bylaws. So proceeding with third reading of the proposed bylaw amendments would indicate that Council is relatively satisfied with the proposed bylaws as currently written, or alternatively, Council may wish to direct staff to refine the proposed bylaw amendments further. Now, based on the most recent input from the public, I would recommend that Council should consider if they specifically would like to see further revisions with regards to any or all of the following items. So specifically the location of the zones being proposed, either adding or removing specific zones, odor and emissions control, changes to the 300-meter buffer zone that limit clustering of cannabis production facilities, or other changes to the 300-meter buffer zone, adding different like parks uses or removing different uses, introducing greater setbacks between conflicting uses, or other changes that Council might consider appropriate. So I'll leave it for there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, are there questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director brought up a good odor and emission control. If this all goes through and there's odors out there that the residents aren't liking, is that a city bylaw thing, or would that be an RCMP thing to close the facility down until the odor becomes under control again?
Thank you. I'm not sure, Caitlin, if you're able to answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the bylaws would have some stipulations around requirements to contain odor, and certainly we would be able to enforce that. It would not have to be the RCMP. It would be a city bylaw to enforce.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you very much. Would that give the city the right for them to cease operation until the odor becomes non-existent? Because I mean, during the public hearing, that seemed to be the biggest thing was odor, even with existing facilities that are in Port Alberni right now. So I mean, if we can curb that odor, I think we've got no worries at all.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to clarify, I'm not specifically certain that we would be able to have corporations cease operation, but we would be able to enact fines, which would incentivize the activity that's not in compliance with our bylaws to come into compliance with the bylaws.
Thank you. And just one thing that I would like to add is that we don't have any facilities currently in town that are the type of facilities that we are talking about enabling here. So there's facilities that are licensed under old rules. There's facilities that have personal grow licenses attached to commercial areas. But the system that's in place with Health Canada now is completely separate from those old systems. So I think that's important to differentiate, as I know that members of the public have come to me and said, well, what about this one on this street, or what about this one on this street that exist and they don't exist to the standard that we deem adequate as a community. And I, completely agree on some of the existing facilities we have. That is not how I want to see cannabis facilities operating in terms of odor. I don't believe it meets the standard, and we have been challenged to deal with those because of, Health Canada rights and things like that. So this is a very different system, and I think it's important for us to make sure that we are recognizing that we are talking about two very distinct types of licenses and sets of regulations. So I have a lot of confidence in the new set of regulations, but I completely understand people feeling uncertain because of some of the old type of facilities and some of how the old facilities were allowed in the past. So I just think it's important to recognize that distinction. Thank you, Councillor Washington. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make a comment. At the public hearing, I did not say anything because I feel at a public hearing, it's my job to listen. But I felt that there was some concern that this is very sudden and we were trying to push this through, and that is certainly not the case. I want just want to make sure the public is aware. This process has been over a year and coming. We did extensive in-public surveys. We did online surveys. It's been to the Advisory Planning Commission a couple of times. It's been to council a couple of times. So it's been a very long process. This is not something that's just started and we're trying to get through quickly. We're really trying to take our time and do it right and do it correctly. But I do appreciate the concerns that we did hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other comments from council? Okay, Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motions as written?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report of the public hearing held September 14th, 2020 regarding bylaw numbers 5012 and 5013 be received.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Washington. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, carried. And if you want to continue.
I'd like to move that official community plan amendment number T5 cannabis cultivation development permit area regulations bylaw number 5012 be read a third time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Washington. Councillor Corbeil, question?
Yes, just a question, Madam Mayor. So if we pass this, that it's read a third time, does that negate our opportunity to put in some improvements regarding the odor control?
If you'd like to make changes, I would suggest that now is the time. We can cancel a process at any time, but third reading would be the best time to request any changes.
Well, just reading what Caitlin had in there about potential to make some changes. And as I think Councillor Washington pointed out, that the odor issue was by far the biggest issue. And I'm not 100% sure if what we're passing right now actually takes care of that. Caitlin, maybe you could clarify that for me.
That would be great, Caitlin.
Here, let me just pull up the section here in the report so I can get the wording correctly. Here we go. So if you look under basically in the proposal to amend the official community plan by adding specific development permit area requirements for cannabis production facilities, we've requested, or we would be requesting that as part of any development permit application for a cannabis production facility, the applicant must include information on venting, as well as information on how odors from the business would be addressed, and make sure that that is proven out through the development permit process specifically. And then we've also included some general regulations, again, as similar to some of our other industrial zones, to make sure that with a cannabis production facility, odor, noise, light, and glare within the facility must be contained. And that's 6.27.4 of the proposed recommendations.
Thank you. So that's included in what we are already passing.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank
Caitlin.
No problem.
Thanks so much. I have Councillor Washington and then Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So what we're doing now is to make a cannabis production facility approved by Health Canada. That's correct?
Caitlin?
Yep. So all the any sort of regulated cannabis production facility is approved through Health Canada by the federal government.
Oh, okay, and sorry, but the ones that are existing now that Mayor Minion's mentioned, with personal licenses and stuff like that, that are admitting odors into our city, they're not Health Canada approved. They're sort of going to be like a grandfather thing.
That's correct. So essentially there was a segment of time when there was personal licenses being issued and medical marijuana licenses being issued under a different set of regulations than what has been introduced and is now regulating the industry. So those would be essentially grandfathered until they ceased operation or other direction was given by the federal government.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question to our manager of planning there. Have we also compared ourselves to other communities? Like they must be having the same discussions and that, and how is it working for them? Just out of curiosity, I'm just interested in other communities too.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question. So it would be stretching my memory to recall the specific details now, just because we brought that information forward back in 2019 and I think early this year. But essentially, we had conducted a review of other municipalities, primarily in British Columbia, that had introduced regulations to permit cannabis production facilities, and to try to get a sense of what regulations they had put in place and where they were permitting zones. And to try to get a sense of what types of rules we would want to glean from those people who have already done it. So yes, we did take a look at that, and some of that certainly informed what we're doing. So yeah, and I can certainly we could bring back that information or share that with you if you would like a refresher.
No, it's always good for the public to hear that again, that we have gone the extra mile type of thing. So especially with new people moving into our community. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for that question, Councillor Solda. The nice thing about having done this work over many months is it's given opportunity for members of the public to engage with us in a number of different ways, and some of those being formal, but certainly some of them also just being community conversations, and members of the public reaching out to councillors to talk about concerns or what they like, what they don't like. The challenge, of course, with that is that people may not have followed the entire process, start to finish. So because it has happened over many months, but I'm really confident in the process that we followed with the public. And for me personally, I have heard so much from the public on this in a number of ways, which is nice because I feel like we've reached quite a broad segment of our community. But it certainly hasn't all been, since the public hearing or with the public hearing or anything like that. It's been over, the last probably almost year. So good and bad to that. But I think we've all probably had the opportunity to hear from probably a lot more members of the public than we often do on an issue. Caitlin, did you have a comment to add to that?
Yeah, and thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to clarify that it was very integral to the process to develop these guidelines based on primarily public input, but also best practices. So what we've seen demonstrated in other communities. So those were really the two sources of information, as well as looking at the Health Canada guidelines and regulations and taking all of that information into consideration for what we've developed and proposed to you, which is now before you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then on the motion, and just to be clear, the motion is that official community plan amendment number T5, cannabis cultivation development permit area regulations, bylaw number 5012 be read a third time. So on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And Councillor Haggard, would you like to do the final one?
Thank you. I'd like to move that zoning bylaw text amendment number T25, cannabis cultivation bylaw number 5013 be read a third time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Washington. Any final comments on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And thanks, Caitlin, for your work on this. And of course, there will be final reading still, so more opportunity for people to give input still. Actually, I guess not really opportunity for input. We've had our public hearing. Okay. Moving on to item 3 from the Deputy Director of Finance, 2020 to 2021 permissive tax exemption bylaw 4997-1 and 4998-1 approval of bylaws and amended as amended. And I think we have the Deputy Director of Finance on to just give an overview of this.
I can't unmute myself. Can
We
you
can
hear me?
hear you. We can hear you. Well,
so good afternoon there, Madam Mayor and Council. The report before you is to provide Council with amendments to the City's current permissive tax exemptions bylaw 4497 and the places of public worship exemption bylaw 4998 for consideration. To give you a bit of background, the community charter does provide the legislation authority for both permissive and statutory exemptions. In section 224 of the community charter, it provides council with the authority to grant permissive tax exemptions. Permissive tax exemptions is a means for council to support organizations within the community, which further council's objectives of enhancing quality of life for economically, socially, and culturally permissive organizations. However, there's no obligation for council to grant the exemptions. In 2019, council reviewed and endorsed a new policy to guide both process and council's priorities for granting exemptions. The PT bylaw, which is permission tax exemptions, and the public places of worship bylaw were both approved for 2020 and 2023, the 4-year term. So during the 4-year term of the bylaw, the city requires an annual review of the current organizations to reconfirm their eligibility to receive the exemption. And we also do invite new applicants for consideration. So in accordance with the city's policy, staff did conduct a review of the current recipients as well as the new applications for the 2021 tax year. The review resulted in 6 new properties deemed eligible for exemption and the cancellation of 2 exemptions due to closures or dissolution of organizations. As well, and in accordance with council's direction provided at a regular council meeting on September 14th, 2020, exemptions for organizations whose revenue streams from food and or liquor sales have been impacted due to COVID have been recalculated. So the new applicants, as well as any amendments, are included in Schedule A of the permissive tax exemption bylaw. And they include amendments. The new additions would be Canadian Mental Health Association for caretaker residences, as well as Alberni Valley Hospice. We also did recalculate in accordance with the September 14th direction organizations Black Sheep Rugby Club, Community Arts Council of Alberni Valley, and the Alberni Lawn Bowling Club also had amendments to their exemption. We removed Potluck Ceramics as they are no longer operating. And also to places of worship, we did have the removal of the Cashla Dewan Society located on 12th Avenue as they were no longer operating as a church. Impacts to municipal taxation foregone this year due to the amendments was $6,397.87 for a total value of permissive tax exemptions of $250,000. So the total impact, usually we have about 15% of the total tax levy is our cap. So currently we are at 13.5% of that total cap. So if council wishes to discuss any of the amendments at this time, I'll take some questions.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for the work you've done on this. Are there any questions from council? Okay, seeing none, the report was very thorough. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read these?
More than happy to, and help assure the continued success of these organizations. I'd like to move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2020, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4997-1 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor. Any opposed? None opposed. Carried.
I'd like to move that permissive tax exemption bylaw 2020, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4997-1 be read a second time.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor. Any opposed? None opposed. Carried.
I'd like to move that permissive tax exemptions bylaw 2020, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4997-1 be read a third time.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor. None opposed. Carried.
I'd like to move that places of worship 2020, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4998-1 be now introduced and read the first time.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor. None opposed. Carried.
I'd like to move that places of worship, public worship 2020, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4998-1 be read a second time.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor. Carried. And the last one.
Thank you for your support, Councillor Corbeil. I move that places of worship 2020, amendment number 1, bylaw number 4998-1 be read a third time.
I had a feeling we were not going to get a seconder for that one. I will second. Thank you. Any final comments? Seeing none, all in favor. Carried. Thank you so much.
That's my chuckle for the day.
That's right. All right, moving on. We have no correspondence for action, no proclamations, no correspondence for information, no reports from in-camera. Council reports, any items councillors would like to highlight or speak about today? Okay, seeing nothing specifically. Any new business for councillors to bring forward? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the May 11th meeting, our economic development manager, Mr. Deacon, presented an economic recovery program that the city was partnering with other organizations in our community. I know he's very busy right now getting these grants submitted and move forward, but I was wondering if you could just ask him to put on his radar, if he could maybe give City Council an update on how that plan is progressing.
That's a great comment, and it might be worth getting council an update on the regional district's plan, because I know the regional district has their plan, and Pat is working with them on that, and as are a number of other organizations. So we might want to bring forward to the next meeting just a bit of an update.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be next meeting. If you could just put it on his radar to get that. Thank you.
Yes, once those grant applications are submitted. Thank you. Any other items for new business? Councillor Paulson?
I'm just curious, was there not something from in camera that we're going to bring forward?
I believe that will come forward at the next meeting. City Clerk, could you just comment on that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure if the CAO could answer this or if we need to ask the manager of Parks and Recreation. But I was asked recently, the arena's open, the pool's going to be open. What's happening with other recreational programming? Things like the Glenwood Center, the pickleball players, Sunshine Club, these sort of things. Is there any schedule?
Yeah, we'll just ask the CAO just to comment on anything that he's aware of. And I'm not sure if Will is on or not.
Yeah, Council, Madam Mayor, I don't see the Director of Parks, Rec and Heritage on this meeting. And I don't have, I don't want to risk giving inaccurate information. So I'll ask her to bring a report to your next meeting.
Thank you. That would be helpful. And Tim, while you're on, if you could just give a bit of an overview. As we know, we've had some questions about when is City Hall going to be opening? And I know that staff did put out a bit of information on ways to access City Hall. So it might be helpful to just give a high level overview of how we're serving people, continuing to serve people right now. Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for that opportunity. So City Hall is continuing to provide all services that we did prior to COVID. You can't just walk into City Hall. The doors are locked. There's some reasons for that, but we've been very successful with supporting people through electronic means and alternate means, and where those are not, where we can't reach full service through other means, we'll support people in the building by appointment. And one of the reasons for that is that some of our staff, out of necessity to distance among staff, we've had to ask some staff to work from home. So if people were to show up at City Hall without an appointment, it could be that the staff person they need support from is not at City Hall. They're working remotely. And so by appointment, those staff people will come in and meet with people at a predetermined time. We've had a lot of really good feedback from the public. People have been very, very accommodating, kind, right? And they thanked us for the service and for keeping them safe as well, rather than having them interacting with other members of the public in an unsafe way. So yeah. Just we're providing all services, but we're not doing it on a drop-in basis. We're doing it on a certainly you can drop in electronically, but you can't just come into City Hall and approach somebody for service, because that person might not be in the building. They might be working remotely. Thank you. And it's a question that I've been getting a lot, and I know other members of council probably are as well. And I think the really important message there is that we are continuing to provide all of our services, just in a slightly different format. And I've actually had a lot of really good feedback from members of the public who are working with us in different ways than they used to, and are actually finding it in a lot of situations easier to access City Hall services because you're getting through to the right person right away. And yeah, so I've had some really good feedback as well, but I know it is a change for people. So when there's change, there's always, some frustrations as people adapt. So thanks for taking the time to clarify that. Cindy, did I see your hand up as well?
You already asked the question. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Wonderful. Then I think that is it for new business. City Clerk, are there any questions for question period today?
No, Madam Mayor, no questions have been submitted.
Okay, thank you. Then would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.